Welcome back to Exceptional Undergrads, a podcast where we interview successful students and explore how they achieve successes at a young age. Be sure to check out our show notes at exceptionalundergrads.com, where we feature all of our resources mentioned in the episode. Today, I welcome Gabriel Hamoui to the show. Gabriel currently attends Duke University. Gabriel has a very interesting story growing up in Brazil, writing and publishing a book, and building Bucks, an app that provides financial education for kids in Brazil. His conversation provided me with an interesting perspective on life, one far different than mine. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Gabriel Hamoui. Gabriel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. It's good to be here. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to have you here. Excited to explore your journey today. Would you like to just get us started off here and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on as of lately?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Brazilian, born and raised, having studied in an American school back in Brazil, and just in general, have always been a guy that's been super interested in all things quantitative, and ended up um, falling in love for the financial markets and just in general sales and trading and everything that comes with it. And so obviously, like, due to Wall Street and due to the immense quality of the universities here in the US, started really pushing towards coming to the US to study for undergrad, and ended up coming to Duke. Um, and it's been an amazing time. Actually, almost 2 years in. I'm currently in my finals week of sophomore spring, so almost halfway through. And yeah, just in general, some things I've been doing, as I mentioned, super interested as of recently in the financial market. So I've been really immersed into that. I've also just ended my recruiting cycle in order to break into sales and trading, and going now into my summer vacation. Now I'm just excited to be a little bit calmer, and next semester I'm going to be abroad in Europe. Um,
Hmm.
so a lot of exciting things coming up.
Where are you going in Europe?
I'm going to be staying in Barcelona, and it's very common for Duke people to go abroad during their junior fall. They go out like all sorts of places. Some popular destinations are usually Madrid, Copenhagen, Florence. A couple of people go to Australia too. I haven't really heard anything about Africa or Asia. I know some people do go to Japan, but that's not a lot of people. But yeah, like, Barcelona has my heart. I mean, there's honestly no place better to be than Spain, and I'm gonna just try and travel around as much as I possibly can and visit Europe.
That's something I definitely want to do. I've heard great things about Barcelona and Spain in general for studying abroad. We've got this program at High Point, which is like a Maymester, so you could go for like just the month of May to a different place. So I might try and take up that offer next year if they still allow you to do it after senior year. I think that they can because I actually know someone who's doing it. But man, that's interesting. So you're originally from Brazil, you said. Walk me through a little bit about growing up in Brazil and really just wanting to come to the US and then eventually coming here. Just the whole journey of that. It's so foreign to me. I just want to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So Brazil is a very different country, and an extremely different culture from the American one. And there are a lot of things that vary in your daily life from living in the US to living in Brazil, more specifically São Paulo, which is where I was from. If you don't know, São Paulo has 20 around 22 million people. It's three times the size of New York, so it's a huge city. And huge metropolitan area, and there's a lot of things that entail being in a gigantic city in a, so to speak, third world country, in which there is not really a sense of security, and that brings a lot of cultural differences from the US. So, just as a rule of thumb, people in Sao Paulo, the vast majority have bulletproof cars, and they nobody walks on the street alone in general, and especially at night. If you're trying to go to any place, I mean, you usually either Uber or catch a ride with someone. Firstly, obviously, because it's a huge city, so it's kind of hard to travel from place to place, but it's also pretty dangerous. I've been robbed in Brazil, and almost all of my friends have had similar experiences with um, just not feeling safe, having being stopped in the middle of the street in the middle of the night. I mean, my parents have both been robbed as well, and it's it's just a facet of life in São Paulo that is very present in the day to day. And what that entails is basically um, a life that is more centered around being inside, being indoors. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of things, a lot of cultural things that stem from this factor that end up making Brazilian culture so much different from American culture. And one of those things, for example, is just having an immense sense of camaraderie and just being super open, super generous. If you meet any Brazilian, you immediately see how warm they are, how energetic, and it's amazing to grow up in a place like that, where anywhere you go, any place you are able to immediately create friends and just create lifelong bonds in the span of a couple of minutes. Um, but yeah, enough background. My my life in Brazil started off in a Jewish middle school. I have a Jewish upbringing, and it was very interesting to have this background. I grew up learning three languages: Portuguese, English, and Hebrew, as well as constantly having to juggle between studying the Bible and obviously focusing on my academics. And when I was around, I'd say I want to say like 14, 15, I switched schools. So I started I switched during ninth grade into an American school. And from there on, I was 100% focused on coming to the US. I knew that I wanted to go into a really good university. Brazil has some good colleges, but they don't even compare um, to the top colleges in the US. And COVID hit, and that was obviously horrible, but it also opened up a lot of possibilities for me, especially with the extra time that I had on my hands. And so I was able to just do work on a lot of projects and do what I wanted, learn what I wanted, and just develop myself with that extra time. And and yeah, here I am. Was able to get into Duke and come to the US, and probably thinking of going back to Brazil one day, but not for the foreseeable future.
Hmm. That's quite the experience, I imagine. Growing up in Brazil, like you said, completely different culture than the US. How was that transition, like whenever you first came here to the US from Brazil, whenever you made it in over to Duke?
hmm the transition was not extremely hard for me personally. I feel like Duke is a college that embraces its international students a lot. There's a program for there's basically an international orientation program in which all the international students get to Duke a few days earlier, I want to say, and just basically have an opportunity to create some international friends before all of the Americans arrive. And there's around, I want to say, like 15%, around 15% of the Duke student body is internationals. So it's not a lot, but it's still a lot. It's still significant. And the internationals here at Duke are a very loud minority. Um, Especially the Latinos, which is the group that I most relate to, and it's a lot of what I was saying. A bunch of the Latinos here at Duke too are super welcoming, super energetic, super extroverted. So it's it was super easy to make friends and just kind of start integrating myself into the US. But a lot of things were kind of hard to swallow in the beginning. It's especially here in Durham, which is the city where Duke is located. It's a much smaller city than São Paulo, and getting used to the small city life was very, no, I wouldn't say very hard, but it was definitely not easy. Having to just center all of my life around Duke and just constantly living inside the Duke bubble, so to speak, is very different from my upbringing and what I had in Brazil. Not necessarily a bad thing. I am extremely happy here. I love it, but it's definitely different, and it was definitely a transition. Uh, it was definitely a process.
So you've still got some ties here to Brazil. One of the things in particular that I noticed, you talked a little bit about the financial industry and how you're really involved in that. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're working on here with Bucks?
Yeah. So should I give some background on books?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So a little bit before COVID hit, so around February of 2020, me and three other friends from São Paulo decided to co-found a startup called Books, and we were all super interested in financial education, the financial markets, financial literacy, as well as just in general entrepreneurship and the whole um, the whole propaganda of, as an entrepreneur, you are able to achieve whatever you want. You don't need credentials. You don't need a background. It doesn't matter if you're a 16-year-old from Sao Paulo with absolutely no work experience. As long as you dedicate yourself and as long as you put the work in, it's probably going to work out. And you know that, Jack, from creating this podcast. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure it was a huge process, but as an entrepreneur, you are able to achieve what you want as long as you put in the effort and put in the hours. And so we co-founded Bucks, which is basically a bank for kids and teens. There's an app where the parents can overlook their child activities, and the kid itself can also use the app for a bunch of different functionalities, such as saving some of the money and earning interest on the money, as well as creating tasks, etc., etc. And we co-founded Bucks on the beginning of 2020. COVID hit, so we had a bunch of free time to work on it. We developed an MVP for um, for the company, as well as creating a website and a bunch of other things that were necessary as a base, and started running the prototype with a couple of people. Were able to get really good results, and with that we got some investment from angel investors and friends, family, etc. And it was great. After we got the investment, we created the the app. We hired a huge team and developed the app, launched it, and yeah, we ran the app for a couple of months, and a little bit less than a year ago, so I want to say July or August of last year, we ended up um, selling the company.
Hmm.
And and yeah, so I've actually been not been working on books since August of last year, and yeah, it was an amazing experience and learned a lot from it.
We made it through the full stages of the entire startup, from starting it up, the funding, to selling it and exiting. That's pretty impressive. All by right before the sophomore year of college has ended. Is there anything that really stood out to you that you learned from that process that you could share with other people?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I would say obviously I learned a lot, and I know that it's very cliche, but a lot of the things I learned, I know I would never learn without having done that. So I could never learn those things doing an MBA or getting a business or an econ undergrad. And it showed me the importance of soft skills. And I do feel like this is a topic that is very present on nowadays. I mean, a lot of people are talking about how soft skills are supersede hard skills a lot of times, but it's it's very interesting to actually see it in practice. And I basically the my biggest takeaway from the entire process was that developing a certain set of soft skills will allow you to do whatever you want, and you don't have to have any type of background, any type of hard skills. You don't have to have a college degree, you don't have to have anything. um but they will allow you to build that foundation with time. And some of those soft skills, especially to me, were first of all proactivity. You have to be a guy that's willing to go after it and take that initiative and stick to it and just be proactive. Obviously, having the ability to learn independently is an incredible thing. Like knowing how to research, how to study up, how to keep yourself accountable for learning things is super important. I mean, I had to learn the financial legal system of Brazil kind of on my own together with my partners, and it's not something that I'm interested in. It's not something that I enjoyed reading about, but it was essential for us to have books be successful. And having the ability to learn that without having to do a certificate or whatever, just researching it is super important. And obviously, to me, the most important is just having people skills and interpersonal skills. So being able to um, influence people, being able to um, coordinate employees, coworkers, and even your bosses, and learning how to best manage your resources is essential. And there are a bunch of good resources on how to learn that and how to develop that. But to me, the best way to learn those three skills is just going out there and practicing and just failing and slowly learning how to develop that.
I think you mentioned a lot of great different skills, and I also think that the soft skills, like you said, are extremely important. Like you said, productivity, being able to learn, as well as the just communication and interpersonal skills. It's something that I've noticed with this podcast and building out the rest of the business here. A lot of the big things for me was like learning how to really be productive. And of course, like I've been able to do that. I use like a lot of routines and whatnot to keep myself on track for what I need to do and different stuff like that. But I think one of the important things that I really just started learning like a couple months ago or so is really developing those interpersonal skills even more, especially with a podcast. Being able to like speak to people a lot and interact with them is something that's very important. But I think even more of that is like being able to do that with other people just randomly. It's something that I've been working on myself, which is like going out and just talking to random people all the time to be able to just say, like, oh, like, this is who I want to talk to or whatever. Like, this person seems cool, then I'll just go and talk to them immediately. And getting over that like mental barrier I almost had growing up as like more of a shy kid to be able to just go out and just be the person who talks to whoever. I also learned that whenever I was learning working as a server at a bar for the past like couple years for summers and whatnot. Didn't have like an internship or anything, but I just worked there and I was able to interact with a whole bunch of people. And I thought that that was something that is actually very important because it gives you the skill where you have to go out there and talk to the people or else you're not going to make like any money.
Yeah, I mean, developing those interpersonal skills are super important, and as you mentioned, it's super important to develop them for for a career. But it's also really good to just have the ability to go up to people and just talk and just learn from them. And a great resource that I'm sure uh, a bunch of you guys have heard of is the YouTube channel, the YouTube, the YouTube channel Yes Theory. I mean, they do some amazing work with that, and they really inspired me to just go out there and seek discomfort as per their mantra, and just try and really put yourself in that position in which, even though you initially feel super scared to go up to somebody, approach them, talk to them, or ask them a question, especially if it's somebody that is important or if it's somebody that you've heard of before. But the more you do it, the more you put yourself out there, the more you talk to people, the easier it becomes. And it also becomes fun. And it's always an amazing experience meeting new people, meeting new cultures, and just developing a wide network of friends.
Now,
Mhm.
you also said some stuff here. Obviously, one of the top things that you said was productivity. How did you become a much more productive person? Did you have any like habits that you did for change or any sort of things like that? What's really keeping you focused and productive to work on things, maybe like books whenever you're working on that, or maybe schoolwork or any of the other ventures that you're working on now?
Productivity is one of the most important things uh, you could have, and I always like to say that with in general with soft skills, but especially productivity, it's not it's not necessarily a a thing that you're going to develop. It's not a thing that you're going to develop from a day to the next. It's something that takes time. It's something that you have to cultivate and build. And for me, my epiphany regarding productivity came while I was writing my book. I started off just writing whenever I wanted to. I I would say I wrote about once or twice a week. I would separate like a few hours during the day, just go to a chill spot somewhere in the city, maybe a cafe, a bar, just sit down and write. And it took me about 2 months to finish the first chapter of my book, which was much slower than I wanted to, but I was still happy that I was getting work done and I was still being productive. I mean, it's worth noting that having the ability to work on it once or twice a week, still needed a bunch of previous productivity and a bunch of previous work for you to be able to do that. But um, the huge step was when I read over the first chapter and started editing it, and realized what a mess it was, and just how it wasn't in general coherent, and the storyline wasn't really there. And so I committed myself to writing every single day and creating a habit of it. And this was my epiphany regarding productivity. The thing about being productive is creating a habit. And the thing about creating a habit is the amazing thing about having a habit is it becomes part of your routine, and is it's something that becomes easier every single time you do it. And there's really not much like that barrier in order for you to start doing whatever you want to do becomes smaller every single time you do it. And so by creating the habit of sitting down on my desk and writing every single day, I would write 1 hour every night before I went to sleep. It was also an amazing way for me to just wind down before I went to bed and just kind of recollect on my thoughts. Um, that showed me what how amazing habits are, and I applied that to every single thing of my life. I applied it to my college applications, to my recruiting process, obviously to books, and even with school projects. I mean, I recently finished writing a paper on for a class called Religion and Film, and it was a fairly big paper, around, I want to say, like 5 or 6 pages, which required a lot of research, a lot of reading other academic sources. And the way that I did it was just basically for the past week, every single day, I would separate a certain amount of time to work on it. And because I was working every single day on it, it had a good consistency, it had a good flow, and just in general made me super productive and able to almost always finish whatever I want, um, within a certain time frame. But productivity comes hand in hand with organization, and we can go a little bit more into how to be organized if you want.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would say first though, I know you mentioned writing a book. I've looked into it a little bit, but you kind of walked us through more of the process of how you wrote the book. Can you tell us a little bit about what the book is about and kind of the background behind why you decided to write it?
So I started getting into philosophy when I was around 12 or 13. I was still studying in my Jewish middle school, and I had I honestly, it was so long ago that I can't really pinpoint what started my my philosophical journey, but I just started rethinking all of the main premises that I had adopted for my life. And the big one was God. Is there a God? And being having had not necessarily a religious upbringing, but definitely Jewish upbringing with very religious grandparents in a very religious school and a lot of very religious friends, that was a hard thing to doubt. Doubting the existence of God was not at all something that was discussed within any of my friends or any of my um, social facets of life. And it was just a journey that I had to embark on my own. And from around 12 or 13, I started thinking about that. Eventually came to the personal conclusion that I honestly do not believe in God, and I'm personally an atheist. And that just kind of created a cycle, a positive feedback cycle, in which I became a cynic and started just rethinking and trying to derive all of the premises for my life. And so the first one was God. I spent a lot of time thinking about the afterlife, a lot of time thinking about what the meaning of life is, how to be happy, whether or not one should strive to be happy, along with a bunch of other questions. And this just kind of became part of my personality, being a cynic and being a guy that won't quickly jump to conclusions, especially regarding big questions, was something that was part of my life since I was 13. And eventually, ideas and um, all of the ideas that I had developed became so large and so present in my life that I felt the need to just start writing them down, because I just had so many thoughts and I wanted to structure them. And the original plan for my book was always for it to be a personal diary, for so to speak, a personal diary. I wasn't gonna have diary entries or anything like that, but I never planned on publishing it. I didn't tell anybody that I was writing the book for a long time, and it just became a personal project that I was doing parallel to books, parallel to applying to colleges, just something that I was doing on my own. And the book itself is structured in five different parts. It's five chapters, each chapter answering one of those big questions. So one of them is there a God? Is there an afterlife? And what is the meaning of life? I also talk about determinism and whether or not we have free will, as well as talking about how to be happy. And each one of those chapters answers one of those questions. And as I mentioned, I wrote them in this during COVID. So in this from around March of 2020 until I want to say like September, October of 2020. So around 6 months, and didn't tell anybody. Didn't Only my best friend at the time knew that I was writing the book. He helped me kind of edit some things, but I just kept it on a Google Docs for about a year until December of last year, so December of 2023, when, or was it December of 2022? Sorry, December of 2022. So my freshman, um, the end of my freshman fall, when I decided to publish the book. There were a number of different factors that came into the decision, but after I decided that, I kind of told my friends, told my parents that I had written a book. Obviously, sent them the PDF for them to kind of give me tips and feedback. I had to rewrite a bunch of stuff because I, as I said, I originally didn't write it having the intention of people reading the book. So I had to rewrite a bunch of stuff, change the wording, change some wordings, um, not curse as much as I was cursing, and yeah, ended up publishing it, and here we are.
That's a wild dive into philosophy. I think that makes sense why a lot of what you've been talking about is a lot of like research and like really making sure that you understand a lot of the different questions. I actually have like 80,000 words of a book myself that I began writing like a while ago. And I've looked into like how to publish this stuff and self-publishing. How'd you end up publishing the book? Did you go for like a self-publishing route or editing and stuff like that? What was the process of actually bringing this book to the world?
Yeah. First of all, that's amazing. Congratulations, and I definitely want to hear more about your book as well. And I know how hard it is. 80,000 words is a lot. I think mine had around 60. So congrats on that. I know how hard it must have been. But in terms of publishing it and just the general process that comes with self-publishing, nowadays it's super easy to get your book out. And it really depends on what your goal is. My goal was never to achieve fame or get any money from the book. I think I have less than 20 sales to date or something like that. I haven't checked in over a year, but the the way I did it was through Amazon KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing. They allow you to just upload kind of your EPUB file, and you create a cover. I created a cover using Photoshop. Obviously, wrote a little bit for like a forward, etc., a glossary, and then after you upload the book, they let you like choose pricing options, different tags, your title, all of that, and you publish it. And you can publish it physically. You can also publish it. I have a physical copy of the book.
Hmm.
That I also did with Amazon, and and it's super easy nowadays. But if you go through that route, you're probably not gonna have a lot of success in your book. Your book is gonna be out there, but it depends. It's 100% gonna depend on your own personal marketing, and because you have a podcast, because you kind of have a following, I'm sure it won't be that hard for you to market your book. But if you're looking for a bigger scale, then I definitely recommend going through the publisher route, through the traditional route. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. I did some research on that. I talked to a few publishers. Just basically having your manuscript, talk to them, send them a copy, or just usually they ask for a single chapter. Um, and if they like it, they'll request for the full manuscript. If they like that, then they'll sign you. Usually, what happens is you sign with a publisher before you start writing the book. So the fact that you already have the book is a great it's a great plus for you, and it really depends on the scale and what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, a buddy of mine who I've had on the podcast, Jack Haramio, he decided he was going to write like books and self-publish them as well. He just came out with one that was like a real estate book as well, which is super cool. But he came out with a book and he's just going to like keep self-publishing books essentially, and he's looking to hopefully live off of like the cash flow of those books eventually, which is cool. And like that's what I said. Like for myself, obviously, like I feel like I want to go more of like the self-publishing route. I still have to look into more of the stuff. The book that I wrote, which has like 80,000 words, that became this podcast and the rest of Exceptional Undergrads, which I'm building out. It was like the basis of a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, and that'll eventually come out. But a lot of that right now is like me writing some of the stuff down in like blogs and stuff now, which is pretty sweet. So I get to revisit that all the time. But I'll eventually come out with like a whole book of everything, but probably not right this second. I know for myself and my research in the book, a lot of it had to do with like personal experience and as well as a lot of the other different resources that I tapped into from books and podcasts that I found interesting. But what was more of like the research side of writing this book for you, as well as some of the tips that you might have for people for research and learning?
hmm So first of all, I I'm definitely I definitely be super happy if you sent me a copy of your manuscript. I don't know if you're comfortable with that, but I would love to give it a read. I'm sure that there's a lot of interesting things in there, and let me know. Like definitely let me know if you ever need some tips regarding the whole publishing thing. I'm sure your friend has all the ins and outs though. Regarding research, my book was a little bit of an exception regarding that because it's based on philosophy, and
Mm.
I personally believe um, that authority, which is kind of how people describe just basing your opinions out of famous people's opinions. To me, it's inherently a fallacy. I don't believe in kind of supporting people. I believe in supporting ideas. And so, just all in all, I did not want to write my book through a very research based route. I didn't want to say, oh, like this is what I believe. And Schopenhauer also believed on this. So, you can definitely believe in it. And stuff like that. I try to, in general, create a more a priori approach, which basically just means creating premises and deriving conclusions from those premises, and um, just in general, kind of logic uh, patterns. And so my book barely has any actual research. The thing that I would consider research in my book is just the entirety of my process towards coming to those conclusions and structuring my arguments so that they didn't have any fallacies and they were actually correct, or at least made sense to an uninformed reader. And the way that I did that was just basically trying to have as many philosophical discussions as I possibly could. And I'm sure that I was a bit of a pain in the ass for a while there, but I was just always talking to my friends about my theories, and uh, in numerous times I would present them with an a priori argument, and they would show me a fallacy on that argument, and I had to revisit um, my whole logic behind it. But I barely did any actual research for the book.
Hmm. Do you have any tips for people on learning and how they can maybe learn how to think differently, like in this realm of philosophy that you've written on and looked into a bunch?
Yeah, it it really depends on what your preferred method of learning is. But what I hugely recommend, and there is absolutely no problem with, is going as using YouTube as an information source. I absolutely love YouTube. I think there are some amazing creators in there. Just a few quick shout outs, especially in the philosophy realm. Check out Exurbia. It's kind of hard to spell, but just try and interpret that how you wish, and hopefully you'll find him. There's also the Pursuit of Wonder, the School of Life, also an amazing philosophy channel, and Aperture is also incredible. There are a lot of really good creators on YouTube that talk a lot about philosophy, and because it's a YouTube video and it's usually comprised of, it's usually a video condensed into around 15 minutes. It's super manageable. It's super easy. You don't have to actually sit down and be in the correct mindset for reading something as complex as Nietzsche. You can just sit down, watch the video, see some funny images, listen to some angry men talking, and with very soothing voices. And hopefully, like through the process of watching those videos, you start thinking about yourself. And a bunch of those videos aren't necessarily just about um, untangible philosophical questions like what is ethics, what is ethical, etc. Like a lot of those are literally like how how should I act when a loved one dies, or how do I manage a breakup, like what's the best way for you to cope with the sadness and the existential dread of life. I mean, a lot of people have existential crises a few times throughout their lives, especially regarding the realization that you are gonna die, all of your loved ones are gonna die, etc. And it's really comforting to have those resources and watch those videos, and um, just start exercising your faculty of thought with that. And once you start getting into philosophy, then I'm sure you'll be able to find books that you'll be able to read. There's some really good podcasts on it, and yeah, you manage to explore the realm after you break your YouTube barrier.
I think when used correctly, YouTube is a insanely valuable resource. I know this from myself. You could just look up like college lectures from like top universities. Usually they're like recorded if you just like look for them on YouTube, or you could look up pretty much anything that you want to learn. I mean, obviously there's the like instant gratification and like entertainment side of YouTube, which has a lot of, you know, crazy videos, like a lot of just like pop and flare, I guess, essentially just trying to get you to watch something and basically just sap away your time and take your time away from you basically and just waste time. And I had definitely been down that road for a while, but I really like the fact that there are so many videos if you get into the niche of like learning different business stuff or like you said like finance or philosophy, you can hit on a bunch of channels that are really good. A good one like we said earlier actually was the Yes Theory channel. I remember I haven't watched them in like a little while, but I remember whenever I watched them like a couple of years ago, it had that entertaining side, but it also had the side of like I'm learning something and like I'm seeing people and being inspired to go out and do something and seek discomfort myself. So I think that that's a cool channel. Another one that I think, I guess not even another channel, but just in general, it's just something of I actually just implemented again today. There's this thing on YouTube. It's like a Chrome extension. It's called Unhook. It basically you can have it if you turn it on, it can like block a bunch of the different like features of YouTube so that you are not like spending so much time on YouTube there, and you could just like look up and search the different things that you want to be watching or like limit different things on YouTube. There's also another thing that I noticed as well, which is kind of cool. It's like kind of a similar one for Instagram, a Chrome extension called Antigram that I have on my computer here, and it just you can like hide a bunch of the different stuff. I'm sure that they have that for other social media things, but the YouTube one in particular, Unhook, is very cool because you can hide a bunch of the different things, and then I specifically just look up like the stuff that I want or some of the subscriptions that I have that are important to me. And I've noticed myself as well, one of the best ways for me to learn is to watch these YouTube videos and actually like almost think about it like a lecture in and of itself, and like actually write down and like take notes on some of the stuff, because then I'm able to learn stuff from like a condensed perspective like you were saying, and then I also have like the key skills and notes that I feel like I want to actually use, and then it's using these notes and then taking action on them, which has really been able to help me learn stuff. And I'm like not anywhere close to knowing like anything as well. That's something that I learned as well. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which basically talks about how whenever you first start to learn something, you think that you know like absolutely everything and your confidence is like super high. And then once you realize that you basically know nothing, then you fall into this like valley of despair essentially, and then eventually you kind of start to learn the stuff. So I'm at the point, like I've said in a couple other podcasts, which is I'm at the point here where I know enough that I don't know anything at all, essentially. Something along those lines. But it's fun because it gives you the motivation there to kind of understand that, man, I can actually go out there and learn pretty much whatever I want to. And all I have to do is apply myself in reading books, listening to podcasts, or just going and watching YouTube videos, as long as you're careful with a lot of the stuff, of course, not wasting all your time.
Yeah, for sure. And just kind of writing a little bit on that. Also, a couple of quick book recommendations, I would say. Some that I have here regarding philosophy, I think a great starting book is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Also, Letters from a Stoic. I'm sure that a bunch of you guys have heard about Stoicism in general, but that was basically my entry point into philosophy, and I'm sure it's the entry point for a bunch of people. Stoicism is so good, and it actually helps you. It actually works. You can obviously follow the Daily Stoic and all the work that they do. It's amazing, but yeah, a lot of good books in on that regard. Um, what else do I have here? I really enjoy Camus. So like the myth of Sisyphus, The Stranger, a bunch of Camus books are written in a way that it's basically fiction. Similar also to Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. They're all just fiction books where you can just sit down and read a story, but they are so good that you rethink about a bunch of the things in your life through reading those books. Um, that's why he got a Nobel Prize for literature. But yeah, I think Camus is a great entry point into philosophy. If you're trying to go more than if you're trying to go beyond just stoicism.
I've looked into stoicism a bunch now. It's like what I've been reading whenever I'm not reading a lot of like business and like marketing or other books like that. One of the things that I actually read every single day, I know you mentioned like the Instagram and whatnot for the Daily Stoic or just online. I've been reading the Daily Stoic like fully through. That was my New Year's resolution. I don't really believe in like New Year's resolutions. I think that's like stupid. But I say like you should just like start the stuff immediately. Like you don't have to wait till January 1st. But I thought with this book it'd be a good thing to like actually do as like a New Year's resolution, so to say. So I've been reading the Daily Stoic. So I meditate like every morning. So I'll like meditate, and then I'll journal, and then I'll read like the chapter, like the page of the day for the Daily Stoic. I added that in over in January at the start of the year. And that's been super fun. It like gives me like a good reminder like every day to basically just stop for a second and think about whatever it is that they're talking about. That one's by Ryan Holiday. And Ryan Holiday has a bunch of different books on stoicism. One of the ones that I really enjoyed was Ego is the Enemy. That one really just talks about how like ego is the enemy to becoming successful. and to like the success that you have and essentially everything in between, which was a very good read. I really like that. Every now and then I'll go back through it and look at them. So Ryan Holiday for Stoicism, he's got a whole bunch of different stuff, whether that's books or just online. I'll link a bunch of the stuff as well. And another one you mentioned, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That was one of my first reads into Stoicism, which I really liked as well. I enjoyed that because the cool thing about Meditations was it's like his personal journal from this emperor of Rome from like a long time ago. And it's like not supposed to be read by anybody else, almost kind of like how you said a little while ago, like how your book you didn't intend for other people to read it and like you switched it to something more that like people could then kind of understand and read. His is not like switched at all. It's just like his basically like a
Mhm.
journal from a long time ago. So it's really cool to look into the thought process of an old emperor of Rome and how he was able to basically just like kind of hold himself back almost in a sense of like understanding a lot of life and things in general at such like a powerful position back in the day. And I find that really awesome. I have like some highlights. I actually have like the ebook version in my library, and I have like highlights of stuff, which is fantastic. I'll pull that up. But I know one thing that actually was very important to me whenever I was reading this. I have it pulled up here like a highlight. It was a quote from here, which is, "No, you do not have thousands of years to live. Urgency is on you. While you live, while you can, become good." I thought that that was a very interesting quote, and it kind of pushed me to start taking action on different things, which is fun. But I would say definitely that's why I like philosophy, and I think that it helps you really think in general and just think about different things and different perspectives to view the view life honestly. But I really like that quote. I love that you brought up stoicism, and I was interested in the fact that you have such a unique view on philosophy and life.
Yeah, I mean, Meditations is definitely a super quotable book, and I also always write down. I have the I have the physical version, so it's kind of harder to just highlight whatever. But the important quotes, I write them down, and it's what you said. It's amazing to have this raw insight into a man's mind, and if you haven't, I highly recommend Letters from a Stoic as well. Is it's basically this guy from ancient Greece, if I'm not mistaken, called Seneca, and it's
Mm,
just a collection of letters that he was writing to his brother-in-law about a bunch of different stuff. But it's incredible how raw it is, and there are some of those like some of those letters are just basically him telling his brother-in-law to like stop suffering. Like, I know your son died or something like that. I don't remember the specifics, but I know your son died, but there's no reason for you to brood now. I mean, it's all done. It's and just in general talking a lot about things that usually we don't hear, we don't listen from our friends. It's a very different type of um consolation and different type of support that is I think it's amazing because it actually helps you focus on what's important and not necessarily get tied up on the things that already happened or the things that are outside of your control, which is the entirety of the stoic mindset. And you mentioned that you meditate in your journal every single day. Could you talk a little bit about that, maybe?
yeah, for sure. I've been doing that for probably like 2.5 years or so, if not more. I originally got into meditating whenever I was telling you about this a little bit before, but my uncles came to High Point and provided me with a challenge basically, which was like starting more self-improvement in that sense. It was a points challenge, so you got points for like meditating or reading or doing stuff like that, going to the gym, all these sorts of good habits that people would like to basically be on. Started doing a lot of that. Meditation to me has been something of a more of like a calmness and a bringing back of presence essentially in my life where I'm not like going all over the place and like thinking about a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just fully present with what's going on right now. And meditation has been fantastic for me in that sense. I used the app Headspace. I went from taking a bunch of the courses that they had there to the kind of unguided, where I'm sort of just letting my mind just be free and just pause for a little bit. So I do that earlier in the mornings, follow that up with journaling. That's a lot of that has been a lot of gratitude journaling of just like being thankful for different things and then just thinking of just any sort of thoughts that I have. I've tried to write those things down so that I have a good basis of things like getting out of my head rather than keeping everything inside. It's also nice to look back on a lot of the stuff. And I think that the philosophy aspect of looking into different things and understanding like the stoic sense of like what you can and can't control also has really helped in that sense. It's something that I definitely recommend to anybody, so much so that I actually talked about it a whole bunch at the start of this podcast, to the point where I kind of was like, all right, I think they understand. I think I'm going to dial it down a little bit, but it's something that, yes, I really enjoy meditation. It's something that even if I need to make like a decision or something, be like, all right, before I maybe make like a big decision or whatnot, maybe let's take a second, meditate on it, and see kind of what happens. A quote that I have, I wrote this down in my notes as well, and it's something that I really like too, which is it reminded me of this with meditation. It was like meditation is talking to the universe and intuition is the universe talking back. And I think that that's something that I found very interesting about meditation is whenever you basically open up your mind and just kind of let everything go, you end up finding the answers that you need right from within.
Mm, that's super interesting. I mean, I've tried developing the habit of meditation, and I wasn't able to. I was consistent for about a month, I want to say, and but I never really looked into resources on that could potentially aid me on meditating. I just sat down on my bed for 5 or 10 minutes and just tried to focus on my breathing. The starter
Mhm.
meditation things that they tell you to do. Never really got into the habit, but from what you're saying, it seems like using an app like Headspace or something similar actually does help. So I'll definitely look into that.
Yeah, I can send you my thing. I'll link it as well for everybody else. But I have like a 30-day like free trial essentially for people where you can like go and test it out. I think that it was definitely worth it for me. I think having that structure at the beginning was able to really like help that essentially like help the process of like getting into it. And now I'm at the point where I mean I've meditated for like over 2 hours a couple of times, and like it's not really too bad for me, which sounds a little crazy, and I understand that because it still is very crazy. But it's just understanding and developing that like structure and that system that you're able to just kind of get through, like the productivity and the routines that you've had. It's just easier. I noticed whenever you have that structure and that accountability, it almost kind of it doesn't like gamify it too much, but at the end it like shows you like how many minutes you've done and then like how many days in a row you've done it, assuming that you have a streak going. And it's kind of cool to every single day see those numbers go up. And it almost, I actually thought about this like a little while ago whenever I did a challenge over Christmas break for like this past like Christmas break or whatnot in December. I did like a challenge with one of my friends for like meditation. It was like basically who could do the most minutes in like this short period of time. And I actually ended up losing that one surprisingly, even though I did like over 1,000 minutes of meditation in like 15 days. But I don't know what the heck happened there. So I still very proud of myself there. But it's almost like a fallacy in a sense of like wanting to like just do more meditation because of the fact that you're seeing these numbers tick up. So that was something that I'd struggled with and looked at a little bit more into after that. But honestly, I mean, it's helped me out a whole bunch. So it doesn't, I'm not too worried about it, honestly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And those are habits that the habits where being able to develop habits that you don't necessarily need to develop is much harder than developing habits that you do need to. Having the ability to, as you mentioned, meditate every single day, journal every single day, and honestly, to a lesser extent, go to the gym every day.
Mhm.
It's so hard and it takes so much. But I haven't read it, but I heard that the book Atomic Habits is really good in this regard, and it's on the top of my bookshelf, so to speak. Um, but yeah, it's an incredible ability to have, and once you have that ability to develop habits that you don't need to maintain, and the only reason why you are maintaining the habit is through pure willpower, then the other things just seem easy to do.
Atomic Habits gives a good basis of how to build these different habits. Great book by James Clear. His newsletter, I think it's like 321 that he sends out. That's also one that I've subscribed to for a little while now. It's very nice as well. But I think building those habits, like you said, and putting them in place has been able to really shape my life and other people's lives who I've had on the podcast as well. Definitely a great resource. And I know we've mentioned a bunch of resources in this episode, so guys, they're good. I promise. I wouldn't be saying it if they aren't. But yeah, would you like to round us out here with this last question here, Gabriel, which is just what advice would you give to other undergrads who are looking to excel in their life or do things similar to what you've been able to accomplish so far?
The greatest piece of advice I can give you is to work on yourself. That and the other things are eventually going to follow. It doesn't, I know it's cliche and you've definitely heard this before, but your past doesn't matter as much as you think. Obviously, having a good resume and having a good foundation is always good career wise, uh, but nothing is impossible to achieve. I mean, there's nothing you can't turn your life around, and especially if you're listening to this podcast, I imagine you're not. You're still fairly young, so you still have time to switch or to do whatever you want, and so focus on yourself, build like develop good mental habits, physical habits, and just become an active person, a person that is starting things, that is being proactive, and that is taking initiative rather than just slacking around and doing whatever is requested of you. And once you do that, it doesn't matter what you're kind of researching, what you're trying to learn. I mean, you could be an student wanting to go into Wall Street, but you're reading books on astrophysics, and that's okay because developing those soft skills, developing the ability to learn, developing the ability to study, and the ability to keep yourself interesting is super important, and the other things will follow. So do that, work on yourself, always be a better version of yourself, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing you have, and um, you can do whatever you want as long you're um, as you yourself are mature and developed.
Fantastic. It's a process too. Like you said earlier about some other stuff, especially with productivity. It's not something that just kind of happens overnight. Gotta more of commit yourself to these like habits and routines that you can to then really build yourself into a better version of you daily. Well, Gabriel, thank you for coming on the podcast. I had a great time speaking to you here.
Yeah, I also had a lot of fun doing this, Jack. Thank you so much. I mean, you were amazing as well, and yeah, go listen to some of his other stuff. There's some really good things out there, and yeah, I mean, if any of you want to talk to me too, I mean, feel free to reach out, and I'm always available. And thank you very much, Jack. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Exceptional Undergrads. If you found inspiration in today's episode, head on over to our website, exceptionalundergrads.com, for our show notes and resources from all episodes. We're always looking for new undergrads to feature in our episodes. If you'd like to be featured, visit the Apply Here page on our website and we'll get back to you soon. And as always, be the exception.